There are no secrets, only frequencies too subtle for the distracted to hear. The Kybalion is not a book. It is a veil made of words, and behind it, truth waits like a flame behind smoke. Most will never see through it. They will read it as philosophy, quote it as poetry, discard it as abstract. But for those whose perception has begun to fracture under the weight of reality, it begins to glow. Not literally, not visibly, but vibrationally. It hums. It calls, not to the ego, but to something deeper. The part of you that remembers what you were before you became a name. The part of you that is not bound by what you were taught. The part that recognizes patterns without needing permission. And in that recognition, the laws begin to unfold, not as rules, but as architecture. The scaffolding behind what you call life. The pulse beneath the appearance of form. You think you live in a physical world, but the sages knew better. The Hermeticists did not speak in metaphor. The all is mind was not a poetic flourish. It was a revelation. Everything you experience arises from consciousness, not your personal thoughts, but the field of awareness itself. You do not move through a solid world. You are immersed in a thought field, a projection, a layered hologram echoing the currents of mind. The moment this is seen, not believed, but known, everything bends. Perception ceases to be passive. You no longer observe reality. You generate it. And reality responds not to words, not to hopes, but to vibration. Your frequency is not a metaphor. It is your signal. It is the tone through which the field echoes back its shape. Thought is not harmless. It is code. Emotion is not reactive. It is directive. Energy flows not randomly, but rhythmically, and those rhythms are not fixed. They can be rewritten by intention, by awareness, by inner alignment. But almost no one is ready for this. Because to know the laws is to lose the excuse. You cannot cling to victimhood once you see the mirror. You cannot pretend you didn't participate in the world you experience. You cannot blame the projection when you are the lens. And so the Kybalion protects itself. It hides in plain sight. It speaks in simple words so that only those who have begun to remember can hear what is being said. The principle of correspondence does not explain the universe. It reveals its recursion. As above, so below. As within, so without. The stars are not distant. They are archetypes unfolding across layers of being. Your body is not mundane. It is a temple inscribed with the geometry of the all. The conflicts you face are not isolated. They are the echoes of frequencies you have not yet harmonized. Every person you meet is a glyph. Every event, a sentence in the book of you. The world is not happening to you. It is happening through you. And you have forgotten how to read it. The principle of vibration is not a theory. It is law. The only law more fundamental than gravity. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. The appearance of stillness is an illusion created by limited perception. What you call solid is a pattern vibrating at a slower frequency. What you call thought is not internal. It is a waveform. What you call self is a construct maintained by habitual resonance. Shift the frequency and the construct begins to dissolve. This is why awakening is terrifying. Because it is not an expansion, it is a dismantling. You do not gain new knowledge. You lose false frameworks. The tower collapses, the veil tears, the dreamer stirs. And the field changes shape. The principle of polarity is not a warning. It is a tool. There is no duality, only poles of the same essence. Love and hate are not opposites. They are distances. Heat and cold are not separate. They are degrees. Darkness is not the enemy of light. It is its potential. Transmutation is the path, not suppression, not avoidance, but movement. Everything can be moved. Alchemy is not about metals, it is about emotion, thought, being. When you shift poles, you do not destroy, you evolve. You redirect the current of energy back toward harmony. And the principle of rhythm is your compass. There is no permanence, only rhythm. Tides rise and fall. Cycles open and close. You are not a stable identity. You are a waveform modulating within the breath of the cosmos. The adept does not resist the swing. They observe it. They time their ascent. They pause when the pendulum turns. And they act when the current favors motion. To fight rhythm is to drown in timing. To rise above it is to surf the invisible tide. And then comes the principle of cause and effect, the shattering of accident, the death of coincidence. Everything has a cause. If you cannot see it, you are not looking deeply enough. The world is not random. Your life is not a sequence of disconnected events. It is a consequence of vibration, intention, and unconscious momentum. Most people are effects. They live in reaction, shaped by patterns they inherited and never questioned. To become cause is to become dangerous. To the system, to the illusion, to the inertia of unconscious design. To become cause is to reclaim authorship. You do not manipulate outcomes. You align with principles, and reality reorganizes itself accordingly. Finally, the principle of gender. Misunderstood, mistranslated, not about sex, not about roles, about polarity of force. The masculine and feminine are principles of creation. The masculine initiates, the feminine receives, the masculine directs, the feminine shapes. Both are within you, both are required. When they are in balance, creation flows. When they are in conflict, distortion arises. The internal marriage of these forces births alignment. This is the secret, not of power but of precision, not of dominance but of integration. You are not meant to suppress one or exalt the other. You are meant to listen until they speak as one. These are not beliefs. They are not ideas. They are laws. They do not ask for acceptance. They do not depend on faith. They are the structure behind form, the invisible skeleton of manifestation. To know them is to dismantle the illusion of chaos. To apply them is to remember how to walk through the dream awake. The Kybalion does not teach you what to think. It reminds you how to see. And when you truly see, the illusion fractures. The symbols rearrange, the veil becomes translucent, and what was hidden becomes familiar, not because it is new, but because it is ancient. And you have always known. You do not awaken all at once. You awaken in echoes like the fading ring of a bell struck in the chambers of your inner temple. The sound is soft at first, mistaken for intuition or coincidence or déjà vu. Then it begins to deepen, becoming pattern, becoming pressure, becoming presence. The world you once called real begins to crack. Not because it breaks, but because your perception sharpens enough to see its edges. The Kybalion does not cause this. It confirms it. It is not the key. It is the moment. You realize the door was never locked, and in that moment when the veil thins and the noise of the world goes quiet, something ancient stirs. Not outside you, but beneath the self you've constructed, behind the habits and reactions, behind the names and memories that call themselves I. There is only one substance, one pulse, one mind, and it is not yours, it is you. The laws are not commandments, they are descriptions. They do not ask obedience. They demand recognition. They do not require belief. They function with or without your consent. And when you begin to live from them, not conceptually but cellularly, your entire experience of existence shifts, because you stop responding to surface and begin to move in rhythm with the source. You begin to speak not in language but in alignment, not in reaction but in frequency. You learn to see what others miss, not because you are better but because you are quieter. The loudness of ego fades, the need to label subsides. You feel truth, not as an idea but as a vibration. You walk through the illusion, not above it but through it, with eyes that no longer mistake the shadows for form. And this is where the world begins to resist you. Not actively but structurally. It cannot maintain coherence with one who is no longer hypnotized. People recoil not from your words but from your resonance. They sense something they cannot name, and in that namelessness they project fear or fascination, but rarely understanding. And so the hermetic path becomes narrow not by exclusion but by nature. Not everyone wants to wake up. Not everyone is meant to, but for those who do, the Kybalion is not a guidebook, it is a mirror. It does not lead, it reveals, and what it reveals is not the universe, but you, your function, your tone. Your axis. You are the instrument through which the all plays itself. And when you are out of tune, the world reflects discord, not as punishment, but as feedback. Reality is a hall of mirrors, and the only escape is not out, but inward. The illusions are not meant to deceive. They are meant to refine. Each veil you pierce strengthens your discernment. Each false self you shed sharpens your vision. This is the initiatory fire, the sacred disorientation that precedes clarity, and once past, there is no return. Not because you are forbidden, but because you no longer fit. The door you walk through no longer recognizes your shape, and so the old world collapses. Not in fire, but in silence. You wake up and the dream continues, but it feels different, lighter, translucent. You no longer cling to outcomes. You begin to navigate by tone. You no longer argue with appearances. You feel the structure beneath them. You no longer fear death because you understand it as rhythm, as transition, as modulation of vibration. And life itself becomes a ritual, not in robes or candles, but in breath. In intention, in attention, the smallest act becomes sacred, not because it is seen, but because it is aligned. The laws hold you, they do not bind you, they stabilize the infinite. Within the finite, they allow form without fixation. And in their embrace, you learn how to move as the all moves, without hesitation, without resistance, with elegance and inevitability. You become soft, not weak. Soft like water that wears down stone, not by violence but by consistency. Soft like shadow that makes light visible. You become the middle point, the balance of gender, the convergence of polarity, the stillness within rhythm, the root of causality, the echo of the mind. And when you walk the world, senses you not as a presence but as a shift. You do not command, but things move around you. You do not speak, but the field listens. You do not push, but the path opens. Not because you control, but because you have remembered how to participate. The Kybalion does not make you special. It makes you empty, and from that emptiness pours everything that is real. Not because it was given, but because it was always there, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the illusion, beneath the spell. The lips of wisdom were never closed. You were simply too loud to hear them until now. And now they speak, and the words are not words but keys, and the keys do not open doors, they dissolve walls, and behind those walls is light. And in that light is stillness, and in that stillness is you, and in you is the all, and the all is mind, and the mind is waking through you. The mind you think with is not the mind that creates the world. The thoughts you follow are echoes, not origins. Your inner monologue is not the source. It is the residue, like steam rising from a hidden furnace. What you call thinking is often just pattern repeating itself, convinced it is choosing. But choice cannot exist where the law of vibration is unconscious. You believe you are reacting to life, but life is reacting to your frequency. And your frequency is sculpted not by your will, but by your willingness to see clearly, to release stories, to dismantle the scaffolding of me. Thought is creative, yes, but only when it is clean. Most thought is entangled. It carries residue, inherited judgment, memory, trauma, and unconscious imitation. It is not you thinking, it is thought thinking itself through you. Unless you begin to observe the movement of mind not as content but as current, you will never grasp the principle of mentalism, because to grasp it is not to believe, it is to see it in action, to see how reality organizes itself around your internal state. How people behave differently, not when you speak differently, but when you radiate differently. How situations shift, not because you fought, but because you stopped feeding. distortion with resistance. This is not passivity, it is mastery. The mind is not a battlefield, it is a lens, a shaping field, a resonator. And when you purify the lens, the world cannot help but look different. The illusion does not break because it is weak. It breaks because you stop maintaining it. The spell ends not with a scream, but with a quiet no. The moment you refuse to participate in the false, the true begins to appear. But this appearance is subtle. It does not arrive with fanfare. It does not knock. On your door, it waits in stillness, in patience, in the invisible. It arrives in the moment between breath, in the pause, before reaction, in the thought. You no longer chase. That is where the real lives, and that is why almost no one is ready for it, because the real does not flatter the ego. It does not affirm the story. It does not justify the wound. It asks you to release everything you use to define yourself. It asks you to become empty, and emptiness is terrifying when you believe you are what you carry. But when you realize that you are the one who carries and not the thing being carried, then emptiness becomes clarity. It becomes space for new light to enter. Not light from outside, but light from the origin point, from the all, from the field of mind, vibrating into form through the pattern of you. But this, you is not your name, not your history, not your trauma. It is a pattern of frequency, a node in the vast web of being, and when you tune that node to truth, the signal stabilizes and illusion begins to collapse, not violently, not destructively, but gently, like fog lifting, like a mirror clearing. And what was confused becomes precise, and what was feared becomes known, and what was hidden becomes familiar, because truth was never far. It was simply beneath the noise of belief, beneath the surface of story, beneath the spinning wheel of distraction. And when you drop below the wheel, you do not stop moving. You start moving in alignment, and movement in alignment feels like stillness because there is no friction, no resistance, no delay. Only flow, and flow is the language of the laws. They do not operate in words. They operate in motion, in pattern, in coherence. You cannot think your way to them. You must become quiet enough to move with them like wind, moving through trees like gravity, holding form without effort. This is the forgotten art of attunement. Not through effort, but through release, not through addition, but subtraction, not through seeking, but through remembering what was true, before thought, before culture, before the veil. You were not born into blindness, you were taught to mistrust your own knowing, and the laws do not teach you anything new. They help you remember what you sensed when you were still close to the edge of the veil, before the noise, before the name, before the mask. And when you remember, you don't return, you begin again, but this time with your eyes open, and when the eyes of the inner one open, the outer world reshapes itself to reflect it. Not because it chooses to, but because it must. The laws cannot be broken, they can only be ignored, and when no longer ignored, they reconfigure the field around your presence, not because you control the world, but because you harmonize with the source that shapes it, and that harmony cannot be faked. It cannot be performed. It can only be allowed through the silence behind the thought, through the stillness behind the need, through the space behind the self. This is not knowledge, it is gnosis, not content but contact, not reading but resonance. And when the resonance deepens, the dream becomes lucid, and when the dream becomes lucid, you are not trapped, you are not saved. You are simply awake, you do not become someone else. You simply stop playing the same role you do, not look different. You feel different. You do not act in any special way. You simply no longer act from pain when you are awake. You are not above others. You are quieter. Not from submission, but from clarity. You see that most words were only substitutes for feelings. Most goals were only escapes from emptiness. Most conversations were attempts to drown out silence. The awakened one does not run from silence. He enters it and lives from within it. He does not seek peace. He is peace. He is no longer at war with the world because he no longer sees the world as enemy. He does not fight the illusion because he sees it as part of the process, something temporary. Something necessary, like the shell of the egg it must crack for the bird to emerge, but he does not call himself the bird. He simply breathes deeper than before. He does not fear destruction because he feels the structure behind it. He does not cling to form because he feels essence within it. He does not believe in accidents because he sees how every event is composed like a note in a vast composition. He lives not blindly but in listening. He does not demand stability because he feels rhythm as foundation, not in things, but in flow. He no longer flees into light to escape darkness. He sits in darkness until it begins to glow from within. Not because he controls it, but because he finally allows it to be what it is. And in that allowing, he sees that both light and dark are expressions of the same substance, one law, one mind, one pulse. He no longer seeks miracles because everything becomes miraculous. Not miracle as violation of law, but miracle as the precise unfolding of law. He sees how every moment contains the structure of the all. He is not a mystic. He is not a scholar. He is not a saint. He simply looks so deeply that from the surface it seems like he sees nothing but inside. He sees everything because he is no longer looking with eyes but with the field. He does not ask why something happens. He asks where it comes from and what the field is saying through it. He does not fear pain because he knows pain is movement into depth. He does not pretend to have no fear. He simply does not serve it. He feels everything but is lost in nothing because he is no longer identified. He does not cling to the idea of me because he knows me is only a crutch for the mind, and he no longer walks with crutches. He does not kill the ego. He simply stops feeding it. He does not say, I am awakened, because there is no need. The awakened one lives. In the simple he makes tea. He looks out the window. He notices a crack in the wall as if it were a message from the deep. He does not seek meaning. He creates space where meaning reveals itself. He does not carry knowledge as a banner. He becomes knowledge as a state. He does not teach. He simply lives in a way that presence itself becomes a mirror, and if near him something inside you begins to crack, it is not because he gave you something, it is because you allowed yourself to remember, and all he did was not interfere with it. And that is why he is dangerous, not because he breaks the system, but because he lives beyond control, and everything built on fear senses this and tries to suppress or imitate or destroy it, but he is not involved. He is not defending or attacking. He is in the center. He does not react. He responds. He does not rush. He does not delay. He moves when the pulse says move and stops. When the silence thickens and he does not escape into the void, he carries it with him into noise, and so wherever he is, the void is with him like clarity, like light, like presence. Not as idea, but as structure, as invisible anchor in chaos, as the center of the spiral where everything is still. And this is not a gift and not a burden. It is simply a choice to live not as body, not as history, not as role, but as consciousness in pure motion. And in that motion he is not lost because he no longer resists, and so nothing holds power over him. And if you are ready, you will feel this path not as a goal, but as a return, not as achievement, but as removal, not as a new self, but as the silence that has been waiting for you since the beginning. He does not leave the world. He re-enters it, but not as a participant in the game he once believed in. He walks among forms without clinging to form. He speaks without attachment to words. He moves through systems that no longer bind him, and yet no one can tell what changed. Because the change is not external, he does not preach his awakening. He does not wear it like a title. He carries it like an atmosphere. It moves with him like a silent gravity, shifting the field in every space he enters, not because he forces it, but because distortion cannot remain stable in the presence of coherence. He does not seek to fix the world because he sees the world is not broken. It is unfolding. Each distortion, each crisis, each collapse is not error, it is release. It is the shedding of a skin no longer needed. And while others rush to repair the illusion, he watches it fall and sees the light leaking through. He helps not by saving, but by remembering, and in remembering he becomes a signal, not a rescuer, not a prophet, not a light bearer, just a signal of what is possible when resistance ends. He does not try to awaken others, he honors their dream. He knows the timing is sacred. He knows some dreams must deepen before they can dissolve. He does not impose truth because truth cannot be imposed. It can only be remembered, and remembrance cannot be forced. It blooms in silence, in readiness, in resonance, so he does not shout. He aligns, and those who are ready will feel it. They will not understand, but they will feel. They will not know why, but they will move closer, not to him, but to themselves, and in that movement, something hidden stirs, and the illusion trembles. This is how the world changes, not by revolution, but by vibration. Not by overthrowing the false, but by standing so firmly in the real that the false forgets how to hold its shape. He walks quietly, not because he is hiding, but because what is sacred does not need to be announced. He does not need the world to agree with him. He no longer needs agreement. He lives in such alignment that reality bends around him like gravity around mass, not as magic, but as law. He knows the laws not as theory, but as structure. He breathes with them, he chooses by them, he moves by them, and they do not fail, they cannot fail. They are not optional, they are the architecture behind the projection. And when you live in harmony with the architecture, you are not exempt from the world. But you are no longer a prisoner in it. You are no longer at its mercy. You become rhythm. You become cause. You become presence. And in presence, the illusion has no anchor. It cannot take hold where no one believes it anymore. This is why those who awaken often vanish, not from place, but from perception. People forget them not because they are unimportant, but because they are no longer feeding the identity that others once reflected. They become invisible to the matrix, not because they hide, but because the matrix cannot recognize what no longer mirrors its programming. They are present but not locatable, visible but not graspable. They are in the world but not of it. They are lucid inside the dream, and because they are lucid, they can touch without clinging. Speak without convincing, act without agenda. They become the eye of the storm, not untouched but unmoved. Not cold but clear, and through that clarity they become safe, not comfortable, safe. Like a tuning fork is safe because it knows its note and does not waver when the room screams. They do not flinch when the wave breaks. They do not brace, they open, they absorb, they transmute, they mirror the formless. And this is how they walk unseen, yet felt unknown, yet remembered, uncelebrated, yet eternal. Not because they seek it, but because they are empty, and through emptiness the all flows unfiltered, unrestricted, undistorted, and the world bends not to them but around them, because where resistance ends, flow begins, and where flow begins, the illusion has no home. Then we arrive at the place beyond movement. The point that is not an end, but a still center around which all endings turn. We do not arrive by going forward, we arrive by becoming still. Not in body, but in will, not in motion, but in identity, when all efforts collapse, when even the search for awakening is seen as another layer of the dream. Then something silent begins to open, not as light, not as revelation, but as the absence of all effort. And in that absence there is not void, but fullness, the presence so quiet it contains everything, a depth that is not below, but within. This is the point the Kybalion never names, because it cannot be named, the moment when the laws cease to be teachings and become structure, not something you follow, but something you are. They fall away. Not because they are discarded, but because you no longer need to remember what you cannot forget. You are no longer applying the laws. You are the laws. You are vibration that harmonizes itself. You are rhythm that flows. Without resistance, you are polarity in perfect convergence. You are causality before time. You are gender united in origin. You are the mirror and the mind and the movement behind all reflection. And in that knowing which has no thought, you become still, not because there is nothing to do, but because doing is no longer separate from being. The silence is no longer a space you enter, it is what remains when there is nothing left to become, and when you live from that silence, the illusion no longer ends. It dissolves continuously like mist rising in sunlight. It never needed to be destroyed, it only needed to be seen, and you see now. Not with eyes, not even with awareness, but with truth, and truth is not a thing, it is a tone, a field, a hum behind all experience, and once you hear it, you never stop hearing it. Because it is you, not the you with a name or a body, but the you that watched before form, the you that dreamed this world not to escape, but to remember, and now the dream is lucid, not because it changed, but because you stopped believing it and began to listen to it. Not as reality, but as message, not as prison, but as path. And so you walk again, but not as seeker, not as teacher, not as voice. You walk as echo, as vibration, as presence. You walk not to go anywhere, but because the dream moves and you move with it, and you are no longer fooled by its shapes, no longer seduced by its mirrors, no longer lost in its names. You are here and you are not here, and both are true and neither matter, because the laws are no longer hidden and the illusion no longer holds, and reality is no longer a trap, but a dance. And the all is no longer distant because it never was, and you are no longer asleep because you never truly were, and the silence that once frightened you is now your home, and the self that once craved awakening is now gone. And what remains cannot be described, only lived, only felt, only mirrored in those rare moments when another remembers with you and the field pulses just slightly and the veil shivers and you know once again what you always knew.